Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, DwyerVIP.com, on Roku, Dwyer Boxing. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. You know, sometimes boxing simply delivers more than other sports. This is one of those times. Other sports can talk about legacy. This fight is about legacy. Understand that in this Carl Froch, Mikkel Kessler rematch, more is riding on this fight in terms of legacy, quite frankly, for Carl Froch, than is riding for any other fighter in any other fight scheduled so far for this year, in my opinion. If Floyd Mayweather were to lose to Robert Guerrero, we would say, okay, well, Mayweather's no longer defeated, but Mayweather's 36 years old. He had an excellent run. He was the man in his day. But understand what's at stake here for Carl Froch. Carl Froch is actually trying to beat two men. There's Mikkel Kessler, who's in front of him. And understand, Froch is 35, Kessler is 34. This is for supremacy at 168 pounds in Europe. Now, I understand there are people like myself out there who actually believe that the best 168-pounder in Europe right now is James DeGale. There are others who believe, including the fighter himself, that the best 168er in Europe right now is the man who beat DeGale, allegedly, George Groves, right? Let's just put it this way. I know Froch lost to Andre Ward, but Andre Ward is really a Sugar Ray Robinson type figure. He's an outlier, right? People assume that there's Andre Ward and then there's everyone else in the division. This is more provincial. This is more continental. This is for supremacy really in the neighborhood, right? Whoever wins this fight literally will be viewed differently. You need to view this fight like you would view a Ray Leonard, Marvin Hagler dust-up. And for Carl Froch, understand, Kessler's one man he's trying to beat. The other is Joe Calzaghe, right? Calzaghe beat Mikkel Kessler in the past. If Froch loses to Kessler a second time, barring some freak type of robbery, there'll be no outcry for a third Froch-Kessler fight. Froch will be viewed as having lost twice to a man who got his first loss to Joe Calzaghe. Froch will never be placed on the same pedestal as Joe Calzaghe if he loses this fight. So if Froch wants to be viewed as the best 168-pounder out of the UK, or if Froch merely wants to be in the sentence, he's going to have to handle business in this fight. He does have a compelling argument. His level of competition has been much greater than that Joe Calzaghe fought. Although that book's still being written with every win that Bernard Hopkins gets. Understand, legacy is a bit fluid, right, until the guys retire. But understand, if Froch is going to be the man in the UK, he has to win this fight. Now, let's go one step further. What I'm going to propose here is high risk. Understand, it's blown up on me in the past, most notably in a Froch fight against Arthur Abraham. But I'll just put it to you this way. Even though Carl Froch has never in his entire career been KO'd, and even though Mikkel Kessler has never in his entire career been KO'd, rematches are funny things, especially given how front foot heavy Kessler was in the first fight, and given that Kessler's last 3 fights have ended by KO, and given that Carl Froch's last 2 fights have ended by KO, right? I believe the play in this fight, and it's a competitive fight, it's a legacy fight. The play in this fight that I'm recommending, and it's high risk, it's not for the timid, is to take Carl Froch by KO, currently at 11-4 odds, hedged against Mikkel Kessler by KO at 4-1 odds. If the fight ends by knockout, you win, right? The odds are so outsized that you will win if either guy wins by KO. I believe someone is going to win by KO. The first fight was so spirited that it's clear to me that Kessler understands that he can land that right hand to Froch's body. It's also clear to me that Carl Froch has figured out that he can split Kessler's defense with the right uppercut. The punch is there. Also, let's keep track of the chins, right? Carl Froch has a great chin. Kessler throws a great right hand. Carl Froch was down. He was hurt. He was on the canvas. He had been knocked down by Jermaine Taylor off of a right hand, right? Neither of these guys, quite frankly, is completely bulletproof. Understand, recently Kessler was down by a punch by Alan Green, right? Was not a slip. He was hit to the canvas. Understand too, the reflexes aren't what they once were, right? Froch is known to be a bit slow in the ring, right? Doesn't have a lot of hand speed. Kessler, quite frankly, is now in his mid-30s, has a lot of scar tissue above his eyes, right? He's bleeding at the end of the first fight, right? And is getting hit, in my opinion, a lot more than he was getting hit a few years ago. I'm expecting this fight to literally pick up in the 13th round, and I'm expecting punches to be landed. Here's what I want researchers to consider. I know there are punch stat numbers right now on BoxRec.com. You need to question those, right? According to BoxRec, Carl Froch, who's throwing a double jab for stretches of their first fight, is only credited with throwing 546 punches in the fight. How's that possible? As you watch that 12-round fight, do you really believe that Carl Froch, who's jabbing and who's throwing power shots behind it, is throwing less than 50 punches around? Let me also say too, I question obviously I'm questioning a lot of things, but I definitely question the connect percentage listed on BoxRec. They have Froch only landing 18% of his punches. They have Kessler only landing 19% of his punches. I believe these numbers are wrong. I believe that first fight had much more action. It was action-packed, folks. It's Kessler on his front foot trying to hunt down Froch on his back foot, and Froch pumping a jab at Kessler, Kessler diving in on occasion with body shots, right? It was a high-action fight. I think more indicative of the pace that Carl Froch maintained in that fight and will maintain in the rematch can be found in the CompuBox numbers for Froch's fight against Andre Ward. Now let me just point out, Andre Ward's a much tougher fighter to fight than Mikkel Kessler, right? But yet in that fight, Froch is credited with throwing 683 punches. In fact, he's credited with throwing 433 power shots, right? I'm expecting Froch to come in, and I'm expecting Froch to throw very heavy power. Understand, between these two fighters, now what I'm going to say is my opinion. It is what it is. But between these two fighters, I believe Froch is the much more advanced fighter. He's trying to do more in the ring. If you don't believe me, just kill the volume on the first fight and just look at how Froch hides his head. Don't get hypnotized by the hand speed. Look at how Froch is a master at distance. Doesn't even raise his hand against Kessler, who's continually trying to pressure him. Froch is backing up. Kessler's coming forward. Kessler has something like a 70% knockout ratio. And there were stretches in the fight where Froch just moves his body to avoid punches, right? He has his chin behind his shoulder, right? He knows the distance. He does things like measure Kessler, right? I thought Froch won the 12th round of the last fight. I thought the scoring of the last fight was an absolute joke. One of the judges had that fight 117, 111. As you watched that last fight, did you think either fighter won that fight by 6 rounds? Keep in mind, there were no knockdowns in the fight, right? Did you really feel that either fighter won that fight by 6 rounds? I don't. I thought that first fight really was a coin flip. So, here's what I expect to happen in this fight. I think it's going to get physical early. I think Froch knows he doesn't have Kessler's hand speed. I think Froch understands what's at stake here. I think he knows it's a legacy fight against a guy. Let's just be reasonable here. You're fighting a guy with greater volume than you. Kessler's the guy with the heavier volume, with faster hands than you, who's aggressive. Are you going to come out and try to win a decision in a legacy fight? Probably not. Froch doesn't want a decision. He wants a knockout. Let me also make another point too. Look at the end of the 12th round of the first fight. Now Froch is pretty good later in fights. He paces himself well. He seems to have gas left in the tank later in fights. But I believe Froch knows he had too much gas left in the tank at the end of this one, right? Kessler is spent. He's done. He would not survive another round. Froch, unfortunately, in my opinion, looks like he could have gone another 2 rounds. When that happens in a first fight, I believe the fighter says to himself, I need to be even more aggressive in the rematch. I can spend more energy in the rematch. I know I can go the distance already. And if I'm fighting a guy with faster hands and greater volume who's going to be aggressive, I have to think with the slower hands that I might not win a decision, not even at home. So I believe both of these guys come out and both of these guys throw caution to the wind. I'm expecting a shootout. But understand the risk. If this fight goes the distance, you lose the bet. You lose it all. Just like I did when I thought the Arthur Abraham-Carl Froch fight would not go the distance. It did. Let me just point out the difference here. Abraham in that fight just wasn't mobile enough to back Carl Froch up. Didn't have the foot speed. Right? In this fight, we know Mikkel Kessler can catch up with Carl Froch. Let me go one step further. We also know, and as I said, Froch is advanced. We also know that Carl Froch wants Kessler to catch up with him. Carl Froch is setting traps. Look at the 12th round. Carl Froch comes close to landing a fight-stopping uppercut in that 12th round. Understand, when you're fighting an aggressive fighter who moves in straight lines, you can do what Floyd Mayweather did against Ricky Hatton. you can literally back up, know the guy's coming in, and then plan to throw things like uppercuts, check left hooks, right crosses, whatever you want the guy to run into. Another fight. You remember Manny Pacquiao against Juan Manuel Marquez. Marquez up at the ropes, knew Pacquiao was going to come in. Pacquiao was trying to land a left hand. Armed with that knowledge, Marquez walked him right into a fight-ending right hand. Right? I think Froch now knows what to expect. These guys have a pattern. Kessler comes forward. Froch backs up, shoots a jab, tries to lay traps. Right? Kessler digs shots to the body, tries to land a left hook, but has problems finding Froch's head. Right? Froch throws a few hooks. The guys then reset for the next, battle. That's the pattern this fight's taken. If the rematch takes that pattern, I'll be surprised if the rematch goes 10 rounds. Right? Understand, these guys are in their mid-30s. I'm expecting leather to be landed. Right? Neither of these guys, in my opinion, is showing up to try to win a decision. While Froch has lateral movement, Froch moves around the ring. As I said, he's more advanced, in my opinion, than Kessler. I think Froch's upside's higher than Kessler's upside, quite frankly. Right? I don't believe Kessler has the lateral movement to alter the script too much. So I believe Carl Froch knows exactly what to expect. Let me say this too, from the Kessler side. Kessler hits awfully hard. Just look at the end of the Alan Green fight. Just look at his knockout percentage. He hits awfully hard. Carl Froch is one of these guys who drops his hands and who relies on spacing and leaning. Understand, if Mikkel Kessler comes in and actually just feints, right? Carl Froch has his hand down assuming Kessler is too far away. If Kessler just feints like he's coming in and Carl guesses wrong and has his hands down, leaner types like Carl Froch can get hit flush. Right? You saw it in the Jermaine Taylor fight. Froch certainly can get hit flush. In fact, you saw it in the Brian McGee fight from years ago. Right? I'm expecting someone to get hit flush in this one. I'm not sure who it is. I'll concede that I'm more impressed by Froch than Kessler, but I'm not sure who lands the punch. But I am expecting one of these guys to get stopped inside of the distance, knocked out, or at least knocked down, TKO'd, for the first time in their careers. That's how I'm playing the fight. Let me know how you're playing the fight. And let me say this too. If Froch beats Kessler, things get interesting. Right? He has 2 huge fights in Europe. He has a huge fight in the United States, if he wants it, a rematch with Andre Ward. Right? He has huge fights at light heavy. Right? Not just the winner of Pascal against Boutte, but also, if he wants it, Bernard Hopkins. Right? Keep in mind, Froch is not the only one haunted by Joe Calzaghe. Anyway, let me know what you think. Leave your comments for me here online. Let me know who you think wins and why, and what bet you think is the winning bet. As for me, just to be clear, I like Froch by KO, currently 11-4. Straddled against Kessler by KO, currently 4-1. I'm expecting someone to get stopped in the rematch. Thanks for watching.